They call us legends, but legends are built on ashes. They speak of our fire, but they do not see the scars it leaves within us. I have lived centuries, burned worlds to cinders, and held dying brothers in my arms as their lifeblood turned to smoke upon my armor. If this is legend, then legend is sorrow. And yet, if I could live 1,000 more years, I would still choose the same path, for I am a salamander and the fire is my oath. I was not born a warrior. I was a child of Nocturne, a world that burns with every heartbeat. Volcanoes roared like angry gods, the ground split beneath my feet, and the air itself was smoke and ember. To live there was to fight each day against a planet that wished to kill you. My hands were scarred before I was 10, shaping iron in the forge beside my father. He taught me that fire can destroy, but in the hands of one who is patient, fire can create. That was the first lesson of my life, and the lesson that would follow me into eternity. When the salamanders came, I thought they were myths stepping out of the flames. Giants in emerald armor, eyes burning like coals, voices deep as thunder. They did not take me with cruelty. They did not drag me from my family. Instead, they looked upon me as if they had known me my whole life, as if Vulkan himself had placed his hand upon my shoulder. "You will burn, child," the chaplain said, his voice echoing in my soul. "But you will burn as a shield for mankind." I did not understand then. I understand now. The transformation was agony. My body broke and healed again, reshaped by the gene seed until I was no longer a boy but something more, something other. I remember nights in the apothecarian where I screamed until no sound came, where my blood boiled and my bones cracked under the weight of becoming Astartes. Many died in that crucible. I did not. Perhaps it was stubbornness. Perhaps fate. Perhaps the fire had always been inside me, waiting for the forge. When I rose, I was no longer the child of a smith. I was a salamander. My first war was upon Pyraxis, where the orcs came like a storm. I remember the terror of that world, the sky black with smoke, the air filled with the stench of blood and oil. They came with engines belching fire and guns that shook the earth. I was afraid. Yes, I admit it, I was afraid. But fear is not the end. Fear is the beginning of courage. When my brothers roared our battle hymn and charged, I charged with them. My flamer spat fire that turned greenskin flesh to ash. My bolter thundered, and my blade sang as it cut through crude iron and thicker hide. By the end, my armor was cracked, my body broken, and my hands trembling. Yet I still stood. The orcs did not. It was in that battle that I learned what it meant to be more than a killer. Amongst the ruin, I found survivors, civilians who had cowered in tunnels while the greenskin horde swept across their homes. A woman placed her child in my gauntlet hands, her eyes filled not with fear but with hope. She whispered, "Thank you." That moment carved itself into my soul deeper than any scar. That is why we fight. Not for glory, not for legend, for them. For the fragile spark of humanity that cannot survive the darkness without us. Decades passed, and war became my life. I fought in the ice storms of Kun's Fall, the burning sands of Sindara, the void hulls of shattered starships. I slew heretics who had sold their souls for whispers, Xenos who hungered for our extinction, demons whose forms broke the mind to behold. Each battle left marks upon me, but each battle also tempered me further, as fire tempers steel. My scars became my scripture, my duty my fire. Yet do not think us immortal. We are not unbreakable. For every victory there was loss. I have watched brothers fall, their armor shattered, their flames extinguished. I have knelt beside them as the light faded from their eyes. Their last words are carved into me, etched like runes upon my heart. They did not die as monsters or destroyers. They died as guardians, as salamanders. So when they call me legendary, I smile bitterly. Legend is not what we sought. Legend is what remains when there is nothing left but memory and ash. If I am remembered, let it not be as a god, nor as a hero. Let it be as a man of fire, who burned so that others could live. That is the truth of the salamanders. That is the truth of me. If the first fire forged me into a warrior, then the second taught me the price of that fire. They call us protectors, but every act of protection comes soaked in loss. After my first battles, when my blood was still hot with pride and my scars were fresh, I believed that strength alone could preserve the innocent. Dreadhaven taught me otherwise. That world was a hive of iron towers and endless smoke, where billions struggled to survive in shadows that stretched from the heavens to the underhive. When we arrived, we found not a world of people, but a world of whispers, whispers of infestation, whispers of worship not to the Emperor, but to something alien, something foul. The Genestealer cult had been there for generations, nesting like parasites in the flesh of humanity, and by the time the call for help reached us, their infection had already bloomed. I remember the descent. The drop pod shook with fury, the red light of combat descent washing over my brothers' faces like molten fire. Draus, our captain, spoke calmly, as if the coming slaughter was merely another duty in a life of endless duty. "Remember, brothers," he said, his voice cutting through the roar of descent like steel on stone. "We are the fire of Vulkan. We burn not for conquest, but for mercy." I gripped my weapon, and though my body did not tremble, my soul did. Mercy in a place like Dreadhaven felt like a dream already lost. When the doors burst open, the hive greeted us with silence first, an unnatural, suffocating silence. Then it erupted. From tunnels, from broken hab blocks, from beneath the streets themselves they came. Twisted shapes, half human, half alien. Their eyes reflecting light like stone polished too smooth, their mouths opening wider than any human mouth should. They rushed us in waves, their claws sparking against ceramite, their bodies flinging themselves forward without fear of death. My flamer roared, fire washing across the tide, turning shrieks into screams, screams into silence. But each life I ended carved itself into me, for some still wore the faces of men and women. A miner's helmet clung to one. A child's ribbon was tied in another's hair. They were not strangers, they had been the people of this world. I tell myself the Genestealer had already stolen their souls, but when I dream, I see their faces as they once were. We fought for hours, and the hive burned around us. Firelight turned the smog into blood-red clouds, the air filled with the stench of oil, ash, and flesh. My brothers fell beside me, and each fall was like a hammer to my soul. Jorel, who had once laughed with me in the training halls of Nocturne, was torn apart before my eyes, his hand still clutching the hilt of his blade. When I reached him, there was nothing left to save, only the grim weight of duty to carry his memory forward. Such is the life of a salamander, to remember what others will forget. And yet, amidst the horror, we found life still clinging to hope. Vox signals led us to the deep tunnels, where millions of survivors had locked themselves away behind emergency blast doors. Their voices were cracked with fear, their pleas desperate. Mothers begging for their children, fathers swearing they would serve the Emperor if only their families could live. Draus made his choice without hesitation. We would reach them. Others might have ordered exterminatus, sealing the planet's fate in fire, but we are not others. We are salamanders. We carry the fire of mercy, even when it burns us. The journey was a crucible. Every street, every level of the hive demanded blood. The Genestealers came in endless tides, their shrieks echoing in the metal canyons of the underhive. My bolter emptied, my flamer ran dry, and still I fought, blade and fist against claw and teeth. I watched Kais, the artificer gifted with hands of craft, stand alone in a service tunnel. He held it against a swarm, his body a wall that refused to break. He fell beneath them, but not before ensuring that hundreds of civilians escaped behind him. Even in death, he remained true to Vulkan's teaching: fire is not just destruction, it is sacrifice. When at last we tore open the blast doors, I saw faces that will haunt me until the day my gene seed fails. Thin faces, starved faces, eyes wide with hope and terror. A child reached out and touched my gauntlet, whispering, "Are you here to save us?" Her voice was small, fragile, yet it struck me harder than any blade. I bent low, my eyes meeting hers, and I gave the only promise I could. Yes, we will not leave you. And for 8 days we fought, dragging them from the darkness, carrying them through fire and ruin toward the light of escape. For every step we paid in blood. For every life saved, another was lost. But in the end, millions rose to the skies, delivered to safety by our hands. Hope lasted only until the Inquisition arrived. To them, Dreadhaven was already lost, the risk too great, the infection too deep. The order was given: exterminate us. I stood aboard our strike cruiser and watched the surface of the planet erupt into flame, towers collapsing, oceans boiling, billions of lives reduced to ash. The survivors we had saved were a fraction of a fraction, a single candle flickering in the void. The record calls it a victory. The truth calls it a graveyard. And yet we salamanders remember. Not only the horror, but the faces, the voices, the fragile sparks of humanity that we shielded, if only for a while. That is the burden of our fire. It saves, but it burns us as it saves. Purifies, but it leaves scars that never fade. We are called warriors, monsters, angels, guardians. Perhaps we are all of these. But above all, we are salamanders, and we will burn for mankind until our flames are gone. There are battles that shape a warrior's skill, and there are battles that shape his soul. After Dreadhaven, I learned the difference. The fire that burned inside me no longer roared with pride but smoldered with grief. Each brother I had lost was a coal pressed into my chest, heavy, searing, eternal. But the galaxy allows no time for mourning. Even as the ashes of Dreadhaven still clung to our armor, orders came. Another world, another cry for help, another chance to burn for the Imperium. And so, with weary hearts but unbroken will, we answered. For that is who we are. Salamanders do not retreat from humanity's suffering, no matter how many scars it carves into us. This time, the call led us to a forge world, Grea's Reach. Unlike Dreadhaven's decay and shadows, Grea's Reach was a titan of industry, its skies torn by smokestacks and its ground trembling with the endless heartbeat of machinery. Its people lived not in poverty but in labor, bound to the forge, their lives given to the Emperor's war machine. When we arrived, the forges still burned, but not with the fire of creation. They burned with ruin. The skies were darkened by the wings of the Xenos, Tyranids, an endless swarm hungering not for faith or conquest, but for consumption. They had descended like locusts upon the planet, stripping everything to bone and ash. Where Genestealers had been corruption hidden in shadows, Tyranids were hunger given form. There was no reasoning, no plea, no salvation. Only survival. I remember standing on the walls of the primary manufactorum, looking out across the horizon. The earth itself seemed to move, rippling with the tide of alien bodies. They came in the millions, gaunts swarming like rivers, warriors striding like giants, monstrous creatures that blotted out the light of the forge fires with their bulk. To fight them was not to seek victory, but to hold, to endure, to give the people behind us even one more day, one more hour, one more chance. Our captain's words burned in my mind. We are not here to win. We are here to save. The defense of Grea's Reach was a nightmare of iron and blood. Our bolters never cooled. Our flammers never rested. I fought until my armor smoked, until my lungs ached with the acrid stench of acid and burned flesh. I watched brothers fall, torn apart by talons that moved faster than thought, their final cries drowned by the endless shriek of the swarm. Yet still we held, our line unbroken, because to falter meant the forge itself would fall, and with it the weapons and machines that sustained countless imperial worlds. Behind us, the civilians huddled in catacombs beneath the manufactorums, their eyes wide with terror, their prayers whispered into the roar of battle. For 3 weeks the war dragged on. Each dawn brought new waves. Each night fell under skies alive with wings. Our thunderhawks ferried the wounded and carried children to safety while we remained below, anchoring the line in blood and fire. I remember one night most of all. The swarm had breached the outer wall, pouring into the manufactorum like a living flood. The civilians screamed as the first gaunts tore through the defenses, their claws dripping with blood. I was there with only a handful of brothers. We stood in the breach, shoulder to shoulder, flammers sweeping arcs of fire, bolters roaring, chainswords grinding. The enemy came and we did not move. For hours we held that line. The floor was layered with alien corpses, piled higher than a man's chest, and still they came. And still we stood. In that moment, I learned what it meant to be truly salamander. Not just to fight, but to endure when endurance itself seemed impossible. To stand in the fire and let it consume you, so that others might live. One by one, my brothers fell, their armor broken, their voices silent. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. Behind us, the civilians escaped deeper into the forge's catacombs. I remember turning to see a mother clutching her child as she passed into the darkness. She looked back at me once, her eyes wide with fear and gratitude. That look was worth every drop of blood I spilled. We held until relief came, the skies alight with the fury of our fleet and the vengeance of the Mechanicus defenses. The Tyrannid swarm broke, not defeated, for such hunger can never be defeated, but pushed back long enough to save the forge. When the smoke cleared, when the bodies lay thick across the battleground, I looked at my remaining brothers, those who still stood, their armor scarred, their eyes hollow, and I understood something deeper than words. We were not simply warriors. We were legends forged in pain, each scar a testament not to victory, but to sacrifice. But the galaxy has no mercy, not even for those who give everything. As we prepared to depart, the Adeptus Mechanicus gave thanks with cold, mechanical voices, their gratitude measured not in lives saved but in factories preserved. The Inquisition's gaze fell upon us once more, their eyes not on the children rescued, but on the efficiency of our defense, the resources expended, the strategic balance of the sector. They do not see the faces we carry within us. They see only numbers. Yet we salamanders remember. Always. Every life saved. Every brother lost. Every ember of hope we sheltered in the storm. We carry them. They are the weight of our legend. And the fire that will never die. War takes everything, but the one thing it cannot steal is memory. After Grea's reach, when my armor was scarred and my spirit heavier than ever, I found myself dreaming of Nocturne more often than I ever had before. Perhaps it was the Emperor's will, or perhaps it was the soul's way of clinging to light when surrounded by endless darkness. In those dreams, I stood again upon the black volcanic sands of my homeworld, the sky above painted with firestorms and the earth trembling with the breath of the world's great Warhammer. I could smell the forged smoke of Hesiod City, hear the laughter of children running barefoot through ash-strewn streets, feel the warmth of community that no galaxy of war could ever erase. For the salamanders are not distant gods of battle, aloof and untouchable. We are sons of Nocturne, born from fire and family, raised to believe that strength means nothing without compassion. It is this humanity that sets us apart, though it is also the weight that breaks us. In the barracks after battle, I would sit with my surviving brothers, the silence between us heavier than any words. Each of us carried ghosts. Each of us saw the faces of those we had failed to save. Yet in those quiet moments, someone would always speak of home. Brother Archon would tell of his mother's forge, where he had learned to shape iron long before he ever shaped war. Brother Cern would recall the festivals of fire, where the people of Nocturne lit great pyres not in mourning, but in celebration of life and community. Even Captain Drouse, stoic and unyielding, would sometimes allow himself a memory, standing with his father at the edge of the obsidian cliffs, watching the world's twin suns set upon seas that glowed like molten glass. These memories were our shield, as strong as ceramite, for they reminded us why we fought. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for people, our people, all people, fragile sparks in an infinite night. Yet memory is a double-edged blade. For every joy recalled, a sorrow followed. I remembered the child who touched my gauntlet on Dreadhaven and asked me not to leave her, only to watch her world burn in the fires of Exterminatus. I remembered Kais, the artificer whose hands were lost to the swarm, and how he had died not crafting wonders, but as a shield of flesh and armor so others might live. These thoughts haunted me like shadows, whispering questions I dared not voice aloud. Were we truly saving humanity, or only delaying its endless suffering? Were we legends, or simply candles burning ourselves out in a void that would never know warmth? It was during this storm within my heart that we returned briefly to Nocturne, our chapter's fortress monastery calling us back for reforging and renewal. Stepping upon that blackened soil after years among the stars was like breathing for the first time again. Children ran to greet us, their small hands reaching for the giant warriors who had gone into the void and returned alive. Families cheered, not for our victories, but simply because we had come back. The forges rang with the sound of hammers shaping steel, not for war alone, but for life, tools, ornaments, gifts for festivals. I stood in the midst of it and felt my armor grow lighter, my heart less burdened. On Nocturne, even a salamander could remember he was human. One night, by the light of the great forge fires, I spoke with the chapter's forge father, our spiritual guide. His eyes were as old as the mountains, his hands calloused not only from war but from the sacred work of creation. "You doubt," he said to me, his voice low, steady, unjudging. I admitted that I did. I told him of the faces I could not forget, the screams that followed me even into silence, the endless cycle of saving only to see everything consumed by fire. I asked him what it meant truly to be a salamander. He placed a hand upon my shoulder, the weight of it steadying me more than words ever could. "It means," he said, "to carry the fire when all others would let it die. It means to suffer so that others may live. We are not spared the pain, brother. We are chosen to bear it." Those words settled into me like molten metal poured into a mold. They did not erase the sorrow, nor did they quiet the ghosts. But they gave the sorrow purpose. They gave the ghosts meaning. I began to understand that our humanity was not weakness, though others mocked us for it. It was our greatest strength. To weep for the lost did not make us lesser warriors. It made us salamanders. It made us legends. For every act of compassion, every hand we held in the fire, every child we saved though the galaxy called it a waste, we became more than warriors. We became the living fire of Vulkan, the light that endures, no matter how deep the night. And yet, even as I found strength in these truths, I knew the galaxy would test them again. The fires of Nocturne soothed, but they could not erase the reality waiting beyond the stars. Somewhere out there, another world was burning, another people crying out for salvation. And when that call came, we would answer, because that is what it means to be salamander. To carry humanity into the fire, no matter how much of ourselves we lose along the way. The galaxy does not grant us peace, but the one thing it cannot steal is memory. From the forges of Nocturne, we would graze once again into the storm. When my armor was scarred and my spirit heavier than ever, a darkness older, I found myself dreaming of Nocturne more often than I ever had before. The distress call came from Helios it was the Emperor's will, a hive world whose towers stretched the soul's way of clinging to a sky surrounded by endless darkness. At first, it seemed like rebellion. I stood again upon the kind that blooms whenever hunger gnaws too deeply into the bones of billions. Painted with firestorms, but as our strike cruiser trembling with the breath of the world, we heard the chanting across the Vox. I could smell the thousand voices raised not in protest, hear the laughter of children running barefoot to the Emperor, through ash-strewn streets, not to any human feel God. The warmth of community their voices that no galaxy never born could ever erase. The dark powers for the salamanders are not distant whose shadows devour whole worlds. Aloof and untouchable. Chaos had come to Helios. We are sons of Nocturne, and the people had embraced fire and family. Our drop pods raised to believe that strength means nothing without compassion. Slamming into the decayed humanity that sets the hive city's spire. Though it is also the doors blasted open, we stepped in the barracks after battle. Civilians knelt in streets my surviving with blood sigils, the silence between us heavier than any words. Their mouths reciting hymns to the warp. Each of us saw the faces of those we had failed to save. Half-men, yet in those quiet moments, someone would always in ways no forge could shape. Brother Archon would tell of his burning with marks of gods where he had learned to shape iron the air itself before he ever shaped warp echoes. Brother CERN even the flames of our sacred Prometheum flickered where the people of Nocturne lit great pyres not in mourning. I had fought orcs, but in celebration of life and community. But this was Captain Draus. This was a war not only for bodies, would sometimes allow himself a memory. We advanced as standing with his father at the edge of the obsidian cliffs, Flammers watching the world's twin suns set upon seas that glowed like molten glass. But for every one memories were our shield. Two more seemed to crawl from the shadowed tunnels, for they reminded us why we fought. The cultists hurled themselves at us with fanatical glee, not for glory, unafraid of death, our people, eager to bleed upon the altar of their false gods. Infinite night. Behind them, memory is a double-edged blade, flickered in and out of every joy recalled. Their claws like molten glass. I remembered the child who touched my gauntlet on Dreadhaven and asked me not to leave her, descended upon only to watch her world burn in the fires of exterminators. Its form half-woman, I remembered half-serpent, the artificer whose hands were temptation that threatened to unravel, and how he had died not crafting wonders. Brother Archon, but as a shield of flesh and armor, so others might live. His eyes clouded by visions me like shadows. I roared his names, I dared not slammed into him with the weight of my truly armor, saving humanity, dragging him free of only delaying its endless suffering. I raised my flamer and bathed the creature, or simply in candles burning ourselves out in a void that would never know warmth. When it was gone, it was during this storm within my heart that we returned briefly to Nocturne, whispering of voices our chapters that promised him his family calling us back unbroken if he would only kneel. That was the cruelty of blackened soil. It did not only years among the stars was like breathing. For 3 days and nights we fought. Children ran to greet us. Their small hands reaching became giant warriors who had gone into the void dripping with blood. Alive. Their families cheered, wailing not for our victories. In one place, simply we found children crucified upon the forges rang with the sound of hammers shaping steel. Some obscene ritual not for that war alone, at the heart of the city. But for life, we tore them down, ornaments, and with solemn prayers we burned the halls. I stood in the midst of it, even as we struck against the cult. We knew the true enemy was still to come. On Nocturne, even a salamander could remember he was human at once. One night, on the dawn of the fourth day of the great, the air tore itself apart, and a demon prince strode forth from the war. Our fallen champion of the Emperor. His eyes were as old as the mountains, now a towering abomination of flesh, not only from war but from the sacred work of creation. His wings stretched wide enough to shadow an entire square. He said to me, his voice low, dripping, unjudging. Ate through I admitted that I did. I told him of the faces I could not forget as he mocked us. The screams that followed me even into silence. He said, the endless cycle of saving only to see everything consumed by fire. Kneel, I asked him what it meant truly to be a salamander. Captain Drouse answered with his sword. He placed a hand upon my shoulder. He charged the beast, the weight of it steadying me more than words. His power blade clashing against the warp-forged talons of the traitor. To carry the fire when all others would let it die. Stone and steel shattering others may live. We are not spared the pain, brother, and lesser demons. We are chosen to bear it. Our bolters singing hymns into me like molten metal poured into a mold. They did not erase the sorrow, his armor nor did they quiet the ghost. His lifeblood spilling upon the corrupted ground. They gave the ghost strike again and again. I began to understand that our humanity was not even weakness, as it tore his blade aside. Others mocked us for and then Drouse fell. It was our greatest strength. He fell not in defeat, to weep for the lost sacrifice did not make us lesser warriors. For as the demon loomed over him, it made us salamanders. Preparing the killing blow. It made us legends. Drouse ignited for the every act of compassion within his armor. Every hand we held in the fire. The explosion was blinding. Every child we saved, consuming the galaxy warrior called it a monster. In a storm of fire so fierce, it cracked. We became the living fire of Vulkan. We carried his ashes with light that endures. Done, no matter how deep shattered, and demons banished. Even as I found strength in these truths, millions of citizens the galaxy would test them again. Their souls the fires of Nocturne soothed, their names erased, but they could not erase the reality waiting. Millions more were saved. Somewhere out freed there, from another world was burning, pulled another people crying out for salvation. The Inquisition when that later condemn we would answer Prime to penance, because that is what it means to be salamander, binding its humanity into the fire. No matter how much of ourselves another victory in their records. But for us, it was no victory. It was a wound. We had lost our captain, our guide, our brother. His sacrifice had spared countless lives. Yet the emptiness he left behind burned deeper than any blade. That night, as I stood over the ruins of the hive, the words of the Forge Father echoed within me, to carry the fire when all others would let it die. Drouse had carried it to his last breath, and in his death, the flame had not gone out. It had passed into us, into me. I swore then that his name would not be forgotten, that no salamander would ever allow his sacrifice to be diminished into a statistic or footnote. For we are not only warriors of fire, we are keepers of memory. And as long as memory endures, so too will the flame. The swarm came without warning, as it always does. Tyranids, living hunger given form, the great devourer that strips worlds bare until only ash remains. We had received fragments of distress calls from a world called Velas, an agri-planet whose endless plains once fed entire sectors of the Imperium. By the time our strike cruiser emerged from the warp, the skies of Velas were already blackened by wings. Great living ships blotted out the sun, their tendrils piercing the world's crust, sucking oceans dry, leeching life itself. The ground below writhed with chitinous forms, millions upon millions, an ocean of flesh and claw. I had seen many horrors in my centuries of war, but there is no terror more absolute than a tyrannid invasion. For orcs seek war, chaos seeks souls, but the tyrannids seek only to consume. They do not hate. They do not reason. They only hunger. We descended into the capital settlement, though calling it a settlement now was a cruelty. The city's spires were half collapsed, streets flooded with ichor, and everywhere, the screams of the dying. Civilians ran in endless streams, chased by packs of gaunts that tore them down as easily as a man reaps wheat. Larger shadows loomed behind them, carnifexes, towering beasts of horn and muscle, each step shattering ferocrete, each roar shaking the air. At our landing zone, we formed a defensive circle, our flammers spewing blessed fire in arcs that turned the advancing tide into charred husks. Brother Cern's voice boomed hymns as he fought, his words drowned in the chorus of bolter fire and alien shrieks. We were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, yet we did not falter. For every brother, for every life, we had sworn to stand as the Emperor's fire, no matter how overwhelming the night. The days that followed blurred into a single, endless battle. We fought in the farmlands, their golden fields now oceans of blood. We fought in the manufactorums, where assembly lines ran red with alien ichor instead of grain. We fought in the very homes of farmers, where terrified families clung to us as if we were gods. Each hour cost us more. Ammunition dwindled, armor cracked, brothers fell. And yet we pressed on, evacuating as many as we could, guiding them to fortified redoubts and extraction points. I remember one moment with agonizing clarity. A mother pressed her infant into my gauntlets, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with terror. She begged me to save the child even as she turned back to fight with nothing but a farming blade, knowing she would die. I carried the infant to safety as the mother's scream echoed behind me. In my dreams, I still hear it. On the 5th day, the hive tyrant appeared. It strode from the heart of the swarm, towering above its kin, a living engine of command whose very presence bound the tyrannids into perfect, merciless coordination. Its talons were longer than my body. Its wings stretched wide enough to darken the plaza where it landed. With a screech that shattered glass and courage alike, it hurled itself into our lines. Brother Archon was the first to fall, his chest torn open in an instant. Brother Cern stood his ground, his hymns rising even as the tyrant's claw pierced his abdomen. I struck at its side with melted charges, searing holes in its chitinous armor, but it turned with impossible speed, hurling me across the square. The ground cracked beneath me. My bones shuddered, but I rose again, chainsword snarling in my grip. Around me, my brothers fought with all they had, knowing this single beast was the heart of the swarm. The battle was not victory, it was survival. Draus had fallen on Helios Prime, but his spirit burned within us, and in that moment, I felt his fire guiding my hand. Together, we launched our final assault. I leapt upon the tyrant's back, driving my blade again and again into the cracks of its armor, my teeth clenched against the heat and ichor that scalded me. Brother Cern, in his dying breath, jammed his flamer into the beast's maw and triggered the igniter. Fire erupted from within, and the hive tyrant screamed, thrashing wildly, until at last its great form collapsed, crushing Cern beneath its corpse. The swarm faltered. For the first time in days, their perfect coordination broke. It was not defeat, but it was enough. Enough to rally the survivors, enough to buy us time. Enough to save tens of thousands who would otherwise have been lost. When the Inquisition arrived weeks later, they ordered Velas burned. The planet was deemed too compromised, too scarred, too dangerous to risk. Orbital fire consumed what was left, reducing golden plains and charred battlefields alike to molten ruin. We watched from orbit as the world we had bled for was erased in fire. To the Imperium, it was another necessary measure. To us, it was a grave. We remembered the farmers. We remembered the mother's plea. We remembered Cern's final hymn. And we swore, as we always did, that their names would not vanish into silence. For that is what it means to be salamander, not only to fight, not only to burn, but to remember, to carry each lost soul with us, until the fire itself grows heavy, and still to carry it further. There are battles fought with bolters and blades, and there are battles fought with the heart. The war for Velas had barely ended when our chapter was summoned to yet another desperate front, this time not against Xenos or demons, but against men. The planet of Caridon, a forge world critical to the Imperium's endless war machine, had fallen into rebellion. Its rulers had turned away from the Emperor's light, and whispers of dark bargains echoed from its manufactorums. The Inquisition demanded immediate compliance and extermination. We Salamanders were chosen to lead the assault, for our flame burned fiercest against corruption. But when we descended upon Caridon's surface, what we found was not an army of heretics or traitors. It was people, ordinary workers, families, and soldiers, driven to rebellion not by hatred, but by starvation, mistreatment, and neglect. Their overseers had stripped them bare for decades, leaving nothing but ash and misery. And now they had risen, desperate, broken, but still human. For the first time in centuries of war, I felt my resolve crack. These were not cultists worshipping demons, nor alien beasts that sought our annihilation. They were mortals who had been abandoned by those who claimed to protect them. The Inquisition demanded their extermination. Our orders were clear. Yet when I looked into the eyes of a boy clutching nothing but a rusted blade, his body frail from hunger, I did not see an enemy. I saw the same innocence I had once sworn to protect. My brothers saw it too. Some turned their bolters away, their fingers trembling on the triggers. Others fought with guilt burning behind their visors. And then came the breaking point. Among the rebels was a name we all knew, Brother Kalen. He had once been Salamander, a warrior of our chapter, declared missing decades ago during a warp storm campaign. We found him leading the Caridon rebels, his armor scarred and repainted, his once proud visage weathered by years of exile. He had not turned to chaos. He had not become corrupted. He had remained loyal in his heart, but loyal to the people, not the Imperium. Kalen accused the High Lords and the Inquisition of abandoning humanity, of treating mortals as fuel for their endless wars. His words struck deep, for we knew their truth. The Salamanders had always loved humanity more than the Emperor's faceless bureaucrats. We had always stood among mortals, fought for them, burned for them. And now one of our own stood before us, demanding that we choose, not between loyalty and treachery, but between obedience and compassion. The choice tore us apart. Some brothers denounced Kalen as a traitor, lifting bolters to end his defiance. Others lowered their weapons, unwilling to kill a man who still fought for the innocent. I felt the weight of 1,000 years pressing on my soul. Duty demanded one path, conscience another. In the end, war chose for us. The Inquisition's forces descended upon Caridon with orbital fire, their ships blotting out the skies, their thunder drowning out our voices. Kalen and his rebels were caught in the storm. We Salamanders fought to shield as many civilians as we could, dragging them into bunkers, covering them with our own armored forms as fire rained from the heavens. I saw Kalen one last time, his blade raised high as he rallied his people against the inevitable. And then the city vanished in flame. When the firestorm ended, Caridon was nothing but ash. Millions lay dead. The Inquisition marked the campaign as a success. Another rebellion crushed, another forge world brought to heel. But for us, there was no victory. There was only silence and shame, and the memory of Kalen's eyes as he stood against us. Had he betrayed us, or had we betrayed him? The chapter's records would mark him as fallen, his name stricken from our rolls. But I could not forget. His voice haunted me, echoing in the stillness of my armor. We are the protectors of mankind, not its executioners. That night, as the stars of Caridon's ruins glowed faint in the void, I stood with my surviving brothers in the quiet of our strike cruiser's chapel. No hymns were sung, no prayers spoken, only silence. For in that silence we felt the weight of what we had done. We Salamanders have always believed in sacrifice, in fire that burns to shield others. But that night, I wondered if we had become the fire that consumed instead. And that thought was a heavier burden than any wound. There comes a time when even legends must face their final dawn. After Caridon, after the loss of Kalen, after battles that tore both body and spirit, we thought perhaps the galaxy would grant us reprieve. But the galaxy knows no mercy. Our last summons came from a dying star on the edge of the segmentum, a place known as Pirith's Gate. The world was little more than scorched rock and magma seas, a place no man would ever call home. And yet, it mattered, for hidden within its crust lay ancient relics of the Mechanicus, weapons of such magnitude that in the wrong hands they could unmake entire sectors. The enemy was already there, waiting, a coalition of chaos warbands, demons, and corrupted machine legions, their banners raised high in defiance of the Imperium. It was not a war to hold ground, nor a war to claim victory. It was a war of endings, for Pirith's Gate would not survive the storm. And neither, perhaps, would we. We deployed with the knowledge of death heavy in our hearts. The firestorms of Pirith whipped across our armor, the ground trembling beneath our boots as volcanoes split the horizon. Around us, mortals, workers, refugees, soldiers who had fled from a dozen ruined worlds, looked to us with desperate hope. They were all that remained of so many lost civilizations, clinging to us like children to their fathers. I remember kneeling before a group of them, my gauntlet brushing a child's soot-covered cheek. She asked me if we would save them. I told her yes, though in my soul I knew we could not. What we could give them was not survival, but time. Time to flee. Time to carry the fire onward. The battle was apocalyptic. Demon engines crawled across the magma fields, their twisted forms screaming as their claws ripped through rock and steel alike. Cultists chanted from the ridges, their blood feeding the warp rifts that tore the skies open. From those wounds poured demons, winged monstrosities, horned beasts, nightmares made flesh. We fought them with every weapon we had, our bolters roaring until their barrels melted, our flammers spilling fire until their tanks ran dry. Brothers fell one after another, but none retreated. None faltered. Captain Drause's memory burned in us. Brother Cern's hymn echoed in us. Kalen's defiance whispered in us. Every sacrifice that had come before converged in that moment, shaping us into something more than warriors. We became the fire itself. At the heart of the world, in the deepest forge, we found it, the weapon the traitors sought. A vast plasma core, ancient and unstable, capable of detonating with the force of a sun. The heretics planned to use it to annihilate entire fleets, to tear the Imperium apart. And in that moment we knew what had to be done. We could not hold Pirith's Gate. We could not drive the enemy back. But we could deny them their prize. To destroy the core would mean annihilation, not only for the traitors but for us, for the planet, for all who remained. Yet in that impossible choice, there was no hesitation. For salamanders do not cling to life. We give it. We fought our way to the forge's heart. Every step a struggle against unending waves of demons and traitors. I led the charge, my armor broken, my weapons nearly spent, yet still I burned with purpose. Brothers fell at my side, their last breaths prayers, their last acts shields to clear my path. When at last I reached the plasma core, I placed my hands upon its burning surface. The machine spirits howled in rage, but I spoke to them as I would to a child, soothing them, guiding them, promising them release. With a final prayer to the Emperor and to Vulkan, I set the detonation. There was no fear, only peace. For this was what we had been made for, not survival, not glory, but sacrifice. The last thing I remember was light, a light brighter than any flame, brighter than any star, consuming all. The traitors screamed as they were unmade. The demons shrieked as they were torn back into the warp. The planet cracked, its seas of magma erupting skyward, its mountains shattering into dust. And then there was silence. No world, no enemy, no salamanders, only fire. Yet fire does not die. It spreads, carries, it endures. Those we bought time for, the mortals, the refugees, the children, escaped into the void, their ships bearing them to distant stars. They carried with them the memory of salamanders who had burned so they might live. And in the centuries that followed, our name became legend. They spoke of warriors of fire who stood when all others would fall, who gave their last breath not for thrones or lords, but for the weak, the helpless, the forgotten. We became myth, but myth is only truth remembered. And in every forge where fire burns, in every hearth where families gather, in every world where mortals survive another night, the salamanders live still. We are gone, yet we are eternal. For fire cannot be destroyed. It only changes form. And so long as mankind endures, so too shall the salamanders, the legendary warriors of Warhammer 40K, whose flame will never fade.